musical linguistic objects help machines.
Greetings from Cyberdelic Space. This is Lorenzo, and I'm your host here in the Psychedelic Salon. And as you can see, I've kind of slipped into a permanent summer schedule here in the salon. Besides going on a long road trip and having a few rounds of house guests, it's been way too hot for me to get much done around here. But then I guess I'm getting soft in my old age because compared to other places I've lived, it's really not all that bad. And on top of that, I've spent way too much time watching John Graham's live video feed from Burning Man. And it looks to me that our fellow saloners who are on the playa right now must certainly be having a great time, even though it may be a little hot and dusty right now. However, it's cool enough here in the salon today for me to get this podcast out, and so I'd like to begin by thanking Vincent B., Guy D., and Bryce B. for their generous donations to the salon. And yes, Bryce, I caught your clever message, in case you're wondering. So thank you for that, and thank you also, Vincent and Guy, for helping us to keep these podcasts coming your way. Well, I'm sorry if I left you hanging in my last podcast by promising to get the rest of that panel discussion out right away. Obviously, I'm letting my life get in the way of producing these podcasts once again. So rather than ramble on, let's get right into today's program. As you know, we were listening to a panel discussion that took place at a conference sometime in 1981 or 1982 at the University of California at Santa Barbara. The panel was hosted by Timothy Leary, and so far we have heard from Frank Barron, Andrew Weil, Walter Houston Clark, and Paul Krasner. Now we're going to hear from the one and only Robert Anton Wilson, who will be followed briefly by Dr. John Lilly. So let's join them now.
One of the interesting things about the placebo effect, which was discussed by Dr. Weil, is one of the interesting... Can you hear me now? One of the interesting things about the placebo effect is a recent study showed doctors are most likely to give placebos to, you see, short-term memory loss, are most likely to give placebos to people who will not profit by them, and least likely to give placebos to people who will profit by them. This study was done in a large hospital, and it turned out that there are two kinds of patients, basically. There are the ones who want to get well, and there are ones who want to stay sick a while longer because they've managed to avoid certain problems that they'd have to confront if they got the hell out of the hospital. And doctors give placebos to the ones who would rather stay sick. And they ignore the placebos just like they ignore any other type of therapy because it doesn't fit into their game plan. The people who will respond best to placebos are the ones who want to get well. But doctors don't give them placebos because because doctors give placebos to people to punish them, it turns out. It's the doctor's way of saying, I'm smarter than you, schmuck. I know you're faking it. So that's why they give them placebos. So they never give placebos to the people who take advantage of them.
Put the mic close to your regular.
Goethe said the difference between a beautiful woman and a pretty woman is that a beautiful woman has a touch of the bizarre. And that has to do with creativity. Creativity has a touch of the bizarre. Creativity is the unusual combination. It's what you don't expect. Like roses are red, violets are blue. You think this will rhyme, but it ain't gonna. That is a moderate feat of creativity by Steve Allen. All creativity basically takes that form, which is why Goethe saw that beauty had a quality of the bizarre. And yet when Goethe heard Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, he said, this is merely stupendous. It was merely stupendous because the combinations were too unusual, too bizarre. It took 50 years for Europe to begin to understand that. It's taken about 60 years for most of the literary world to understand James Joyce's Ulysses. At first, that was merely bizarre and grandiose. The interesting thing about intelligence increase is that it is part of an evolutionary process that it can actually be seen on graphs. Count Korzybski started making graphs of that sort back in the 20s. A psychologist named Bontrager at the University of Pennsylvania has hundreds of them. Bucky Fuller has been making graphs of this type since 1928. One of the most interesting ones is the one I call the jumping Jesus phenomenon. I wrote an article about this recently for a magazine called Futurific, and they wouldn't print it because they said it might offend their Christian readers. And I thought that was kind of odd because I didn't mean to be offensive. I just thought I'd give Jesus some kind of, some of the fame that Ohm and Faraday, who had the Farad named after him, and Volta, who had the Volt named after him. And eventually we're going to have a unit like a Deliri, that's bound to come. And I thought I'd do Jesus a favor by making him a unit. And I got this from Georges Andela, a French economist who did a study for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, in which he tried to estimate the number of facts known each year since the beginning of recorded history. He didn't try to measure wisdom because that's a little more subtle. Facts you can count and estimate using modern information theory and various statistical devices. You can get a pretty good approximation. He put the number of facts each year on a graph to see what the shape of the graph was like. And, of course, the son of a bitch was like a skyrocket. He took, for instance, the number of known facts at the time of the birth of Christ as one unit to keep the graph simple. And then he looked how long it took for this to double, to get twice as many facts. And so I call the beginning of his graph 1 Jesus, since it dates from 1 AD, the alleged birth of the late Redeemer. Actually, he was born in 4 BC, but that's a complicated historical digression we needn't go into if we didn't have chromosome damage. It took until 1500 to get 2 Jesus. For the total number of facts to double. By 1500, we had 2 Jesus in the human larder. And by 1500, we had the Renaissance going full blast. And the next doubling occurred by 1750, which was only 250 years. It took 1,500 years to go from 1 to 2 units, 2 Jesus, and 250 years to go from 2 Jesus to 4 Jesus. We wound up with 8 Jesus in 1900, which was only 150 years. Now, in mechanical engineering, which I once started out to get involved in before I decided I would rather make a living without working and became a writer.
Don't rest. You're resting it down here. Get it.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Why don't you stand up? Stand up.
Roses are red, ink is black, do me a favor, sit on a tack. That's a variation on the beginning of this. We were up to 1750, I believe. The next doubling got us up to 8 Jesus, and that was by 1900. The next doubling got us up to 16 Jesus by 1950. The next doubling got us up to 32 Jesus by 1960. You notice the intervals are getting shorter and the doubling is moving faster. By 1960, we had the world-round youth revolution beginning, which everybody's been trying to put a cap on ever since because nobody knows where it's leading. By 1967, we had the next doubling to 32 Jesus, and by 1973, we had the next doubling to 64 Jesus. At which point Georges Andela completed his study. Yes, I'll do my... Since 1973, I haven't found any statistics of this sort, but there can be little doubt that the doubling is continuing. In mechanical engineering, you rate a machine in revolutions per second. If you're looking at human history and over a long geological span, you'd have to start out rating it in revolutions per millennium. And you might say it was going along at a quarter of a revolution per millennium for quite a long time until historical times began, and then it was going in 1 revolution per millennium. By the time we reach 1500 and this jumping Jesus phenomenon is really moving along, you can start measuring human affairs in revolutions per century. In the 20th century, since it doubled between the total number of known scientific facts doubled between 1900 and 1950, we can obviously measure it in revolutions per century and see we reached 2 revolutions per century by 1950. But it's been doubling faster since then, so now we're going to have to measure it in revolutions per decade. I think Tim, in his mystical way, suggests that life extension research is arriving at the same time as space migration because the DNA knows that with life extension we're going to have to get the hell off one planet. I think mind-altering drugs of all sorts, not just psychedelics, but every dimension of mind change drug, tranquilizers, antipsychotic drugs, energizers, the whole field that has been opening up since the 60s and is opening up faster all the time is an evolutionary necessity that had to appear at this point. Since things are moving faster and faster, we cannot afford the amount of stupidity that we used to be able to tolerate. The phenomenon that Tim was talking about, that Kuhn's book is about, the structure of scientific revolutions, basically what it comes down to is that with few exceptions, few strange mutants, older scientists never accept a new paradigm. The way the new paradigm gets accepted is the old ones die off, and the younger scientists get into the more important positions at the universities, and then the new paradigm is gradually accepted. Now, with longevity coming along, that's not going to be happening anymore. As a matter of fact, Rosenfeld, in his book, Pro-Longevity, says whenever he talks about longevity in scientific groups, there's always somebody who says, my God, if the head of the department never dies, progress will come to an end. So we need something to replace death as an intelligence increaser. Generally, the only way that intelligence could grow is to get rid of the people who haven't taken any new imprints since adolescence, as Tim would say. We need ways for people to change their brains more rapidly, and we're suddenly getting this astonishing technology is appearing all around us, which is not just chemical, but mechanical too, biofeedback, and all sorts of ancient shamanic techniques are being rediscovered. There are yoga classes everywhere you go. We are learning how to take control of our brains and how to deal with the fact that we're living with more and more rapid change all the time. Because, for instance, to get back to longevity, in 1750, when human knowledge had just gone through a doubling in a period of 250 years, everything was shaking loose in Europe. And so we find, I'm researching that period right now for a novel I'm working on, we find that all sorts of radical ideas were popping up everywhere that had never been thought of before. And if you start examining them, you find what we think of as the great discoveries of the 19th century were already being suggested, such as evolution that appears in Buffon's book on natural science. And you actually find 200 years before Dr. Paul Siegel, who has devoted 20 years to longevity research and is in the audience here somewhere, I think, 200 years before Dr. Siegel, 200 years before Alan Harrington, who first wrote a book on the subject, we find in the 1770s the mathematician Condorcet in France was saying science will eventually produce physical immortality. And we find Benjamin Franklin saying the same thing in this country. That was because the acceleration was beginning to unleash a lot of really wild, creative thought, the bizarre type of beauty. I always think of thought in terms of bizarre beauty, in terms of Goethe's metaphor. This whole process... What? Yes, I try to remember. This whole process has an interesting vector on it, considered geographically. It has been moving steadily westward and mildly northward throughout history. The first Bronze Age implements are found around Thailand and Cambodia, which shows that the Bronze Age began in the Far East, not in the Middle East, as we always used to think. It spread upward to China and then into India. Then it hit the Middle East, where we first begin to find the records of what we consider civilization. And then it kept moving. And if you study the records of this type of migration, you find the same general phenomenon. What they had in Greece in the 4th century BC is what they had in Rome in the 1st century AD. It's what they had in Italy in 1500 AD when the jumping Jesus thing had doubled. It's what they had in England in 1750 when the jumping Jesus thing had quadrupled and moved westward again and north. It's what we had in the east coast of this country, New York and Boston, between 1800 and 1900 when the whole thing had moved there, and it's what we've got in California now. The formula is granola, fruits, nuts, and flakes. That's what you'll find in Athens, 4th century BC. It's what you'll find in Renaissance Italy. It's what you'll find in the East Coast around 1900. It's what we've got here now. It's the people who are... Yeah, I'm very careful about not saying which of the groups I belong to. That's for the audience to decide. The bizarre, the unthinkable, is where creativity comes from. Like my favorite chess player, Ayekin, one of his games, he checkmates with a pawn. Everybody, especially his opponent, was looking, what can he do with the queen? What can he do with those knights? What kind of evil scheme lies behind that hidden bishop? And the son of a bitch comes in with a pawn and checkmates. Nobody could think of a thing like that but Ayekin. Beethoven goes from the third movement to the fourth movement in the Fifth Symphony without the usual pause, which nobody expected. And part of the reason Goethe said it's merely grandiose because it didn't sound like anything he ever heard before, but it works. A great poem is always a profound shock to the nervous system, and the immediate reaction is, what kind of gibberish is this? If you were to walk through a collection of artworks, paintings, chamber quartets playing, poets declaiming their works, sculptors exhibiting, scientists talking about their latest theories, philosophers expounding on their latest meditations, and if it all made sense to you, you could be absolutely sure they were all third-rate schmucks. But if you walked into a place and everybody seemed nuts to you, like Paris in the 1920s with Joyce and Pound and Gertrude Stein and Picasso and Brancusi and so on. They all seemed nuts and seemed to be doing something that made no sense. Creativity was going on, because creativity is the unusual combination. And the unusual combination is negative entropy. And that is not a metaphor. Claude Shannon demonstrated that in a book called The Mathematical Theory of Communication in 1948, and it's a crying shame that most social scientists don't know enough mathematics to understand it yet. But the unusual combination produces a higher level of coherence, and that's what information is. Bucky Fuller says human beings are local problem solvers. The reason we are local problem solvers is because we can make unusual combinations, which creates a higher level of coherence. And that's why Prigogine is right. That's what Prigogine got the Nobel Prize for his work on dissipative structures. And one of his discoveries is the more complex a structure is, the more unstable it is. The more it's got this bizarre beauty I've been discussing, like an anthive, a termite hill, a human city. And the more complex it is, the more the structure is unstable and likely to dissipate. Only what Prigogine discovered is contrary to the second law of thermodynamics, which only applies to closed systems. And this kind of evolving open system, it is going to dissipate into a higher level of coherence. And the jumping Jesus phenomenon, having brought us to the point where knowledge has doubled several times since 1960 and is in the process of doubling again and will have completed doubling probably in the next year and double 2 times before we reach 1990. In that process, we are dissipating, collapsing out of all the structures we know, not into chaos, not into the collapse of civilization, but into a higher level of coherence. And that's what my acid trips have taught me with a little help from mathematics.
Well, I thought you were all magnificent. And Frank Barron, yeah. There are literally dozens and dozens of people in this room who should and will be up here, I hope, before we leave. I'd like to, at this moment, pay a word of tribute to 2 men who had a tremendous effect on my life when they came to Harvard University in, I think, 1960, and I was talking about Harvard Square. That was my identity picture at the time. 2 men who breathed into Harvard and really fired us up and taught us much about life and poetry and courage. I'm talking about Peter Orlovsky and Allen Ginsberg. Allen's not here today, but Peter is here. I'd like to recognize. Thank you, Peter. And send a message to Allen Ginsberg through Peter. We love you, Allen. One of the, I think, fair to say that probably the mind which has most influence on my own thinking, I'm not sure that's a tribute, or the person who's contributed most to my delinquency intellectually, I think is also in the room. He's certainly, without any question, one of the great pioneer scientists of this time or any time, one of the most courageous explorers in places where no one had ever been before, sending back signals which have changed all of us in this room. John Lilly, where are you? John Lilly! John Lilly! Come up, John! John, please come up!
Thank you. Gee, how do you answer that one? Well, it sure is great to be back again after 2 years. I was here in the LSD in the Future 2 years ago and heard very similar thoughts. There seems to have been a little progress since then. Seems to be more optimism about psychedelics. They seem to be treated now with more rationality, as I was hoping they would be back in the 60s, but they couldn't be then. We were too ignorant. I managed to maintain a certain degree of rationality in the 60s, but I could only do it by staying away from Tim, Metzner, and Alpert. So I hung out in the Virgin Islands in an isolation tank with my Sandoz, while they lapped it up in Massachusetts and Millbrook. So having that degree of distance and maintaining it and being frightened of coming back into the United States under any conditions which had any publicity to them, I managed to write a book, get it published surreptitiously, and distribute it through the Whole Earth catalog, called Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer. I followed that up in 1972. That was written in 1967, actually. Published again in 72. And then in 72, the Center of the Cyclone was published. And we got kind of launched. It was reviewed in the New York Times Book Review and said it was some sort of a cult book. I never knew anything about the cult or the occult having to do with all this. But apparently the book is still around. Bantam is still publishing it. And Bantam is also coming out this summer with The Scientist, which is the follow-up of the other two books. And I recommend them highly and hope that you can read them under all sorts of conditions, including in an isolation tank. Thank you.
Is that Tony with you? No. Oh, he has cancer. I see. Tony is not with us in physical carnality, but she's with us in spirit. We send a message through John to Tony. Right? Right. Who's in charge of timing and placing? How are we doing? Yeah. Is that? Yeah. Shall we cut it here, or?
Do you have any questions?
I feel that it's appropriately controversial and mischievous to say that the asset of the 1980s are going to be the computers, and the computer heads are going to break a lot of chromosomes. I'm sure we have a lot of totally brain electrified computer people in this room. I know we have Francis Jeffrey. Francis, where are you? Would you come up for a second and say some outrageous things?
Hi. Something outrageous is that the DNA, of which we have several trillion copies in every cell in our body, has an information content which is way beyond any man-made computer at the present time. But essentially, the DNA is a computer, and it's an enormous computer tape. It's both a memory, a huge tape with information on it, and a computer for working on itself. And the DNA has now brought us to the point where it's our job to begin participating actively in its future evolution, which is the same as our future evolution. I have no more outrageous things to say.
He does, really, but we'll let him go. Thank you, Francis. About ketamine. Read The Scientist by one of our great scientists, John Lilly. That's, I wouldn't say the final word, but it's the ultimate word. Yes. Where's Ram Dass? Well, I'm glad to report that about 2 weeks ago at midnight, my wife Barbara and I were in bed. The telephone rang, and this voice, mellow voice, said, "This is Richard Alpert. I'm in town and I'd like to come over." So Richard Alpert came over the following day at noon, and he hung around for about 8 hours in our patio. And he's just the greatest company there is around. If you ever have a chance to spend a day or a week or a month with Baba Ram Dass, he calls himself both Baba Ram Dass and Richard Alpert. The wonderful thing about Richard Das or Baba Alpert is he's changing. I don't think that I said John Lilly's one of the most courageous scientists of all time. Richard's not basically a scientist. He's a philosopher and a stand-up philosopher, comic. Yes, right. Whatever wonderful title we want to give him, there are very few people in history that have been able to put themselves right out there, absorb from anyone that has something to teach, to change his life, to keep evolving, mutating, growing. My goodness, he's just begun this process. Where he'll go in the next 20 or 30 or 50 years is no telling, but he's livelier than ever. He's changing rapidly. He's laughing all the time. He's moving around the world like some geosynchronous satellite. He's likely to pop up any place. He's really got it down. You say, "Where do you live, Richard?" He said, "Here now." You don't have to pay rent on that. And the landlord's not going to evict you. Yeah, he's doing great, and we had a wonderful time. He's got a new guru. One of Richard's wonderful techniques is to simply give himself over for as long as it's mutually beneficial to anyone that he respects and has something to tell him. And he's really, what a wonderful track record he's got of that. Anyway, his guru Neem Karoli Baba died several years ago, and then he had a tantric guru in New York whom he said really taught him a lot. And he's now got a guru, or the guru is not the right word, a telephone connection, to someone named Emmanuel. Emmanuel, you contact, is a spirit that passes on signals through a housewife in the Bronx. Isn't that fantastic? Because Richard never has to take the responsibility for anything he says. Which is a very, very graceful and dignified thing to do. Anyway, he's doing great. We had a wonderful time, and the next time you see him, he'll delight you as well. Michael Horowitz, would you stand up, Michael? There's one of the great figures of our times. For those of you, come up for a minute and say a few words, would you? Yeah. For those of you who don't know who Michael is, he is, along with Michael Aldrich, the founder and the leading light with the Fitzhugh Memorial Ludlow Library, which is the world's greatest collection of curiosities, artifacts, rare books, and popular books on dope. He's one of the great archivists of our time. He's one of the great writers of our time. Tell us all about it.
One of the things about having a dope library is you do a lot of time traveling. You do a lot of time traveling when you're around books, especially books that describe altered states of...
Listen to it coming, so you've got to have it blasting in your ear from there. And you've got to have your face right like that.
All right.
And you get your ear attached to that so you know when you're loud enough.
All right. Rock and roll. So anyway, for about 11 years now, myself and Michael Aldrich, Robert Barkin, colleagues and friends have donated and built this fantastic library. And we've been time traveling in it by ourselves mostly, and a few people know about it. And we'd like to make it this magic carpet ride available into the consciousness of Fitzhugh Ludlow and Charles Baudelaire and just Eve and Sappho and just every the mind expanders of every time in history are available, and through the writings of in the books we've gotten together. And these books you can't find really, or if you can, you have to kind of read between the lines. And so actually this could be 1842. I think this could be the Hashish Club in Paris, or the Humphrey Davies Nitrous Oxide Institute, which was just like Harvard, the psychedelic research project in 1962 was previewed in 1800 in Bristol, England, when the leading writers, artists, intellectuals came to try laughing gas. This 20-year-old scientist had just discovered the mental effects of. And these are some of the delights, and we also republish, reprint and republish some of these books, and sometimes people buy them and they go into second printing or something like that. Right now, the Ludlow Library is looking for a home, so it's a big library, and it needs a certain amount of security and care and so on. But there's a flyer, a newsletter, which you just produced, that it tells the story of the Ludlow Library. I mean, we started in 1970, and so we've lasted about a decade, and the library's been growing, and so have we, and we'd like to have it in a place where it could be available to more people who want to research and read about other people's trips throughout history. And it's incredible how many trips have been reported by people you wouldn't believe. So anyway, pick up the flyer and think about it. And thanks, Tim, for giving me a chance to talk about the Ludlow Library.
Thank you, Michael. There is in the room another great hero of our times. We got an all-star cast here today, haven't we? And so many that aren't here that are with us in spirit. Alan Watts, Aldous Huxley, and Humphrey Osmond, and all the great musicians and poets and writers. We've all been worried about a great musical phenomena of the 60s that has been kind of falling apart recently. Well, there's some hope that we can get Bob Dylan together again. There is an all-star in the room, I hope. He first came to the attention of our intelligence agency as a Annapolis graduate and as a naval officer, and we felt, well, anyone that's getting high altitude in the Navy could be of use to us. He's been one of our great psychedelic, philosophic, Gnostic poets for the last 15 years. Walt Snyder, where are you? Are you here, Walter? Walt, come on up, huh? He has just finished a book and is working on another. Maybe he'll say something about that. And anything else you want to talk about?
Well, thank you, Tim. I've written a book on sacred mountains, and I'm presently working on ancient Egypt.
Is he coming through? See,
No.
You gotta have that blasting in your ear. No, that
The whistle.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean that. The sound.
The sound.
You're a rock and roll star. Woo! You gotta feel it. Come
Okay.
on, from there. And you're gonna vibrate. You will vibrate too.
Let's hear it for ancient Egypt. Now, what I've been doing with ancient Egypt essentially is a study of pre-dynastic Egypt going up through the Pyramid Age. And the oldest books in the world are, in fact, the pyramid texts, which were written engraved in the lower walls of the last pyramids built. And in these, the latest Egyptologists of the past 100 years, all of whom are, they're very much taken up with social Darwinism and 19th century ideas of what human consciousness is, but the Egyptians themselves never had this problem. And in the pyramid texts, they make pretty clear that what they're talking about is the transmission of human consciousness throughout the galaxy, much what certainly you've been writing about, and what others have, I think, done also. The pyramids themselves, however, are primarily lineal descendants of sacred mountains, which go back even into prehistoric times, and yet at that time human consciousness was by no means prehistoric. That's about all I have with Tim.
What is the name of your book about Sky Cloud Mountain? Who's published that?
It's not published.
It's going to be published? Yeah, there's a book called Sky Cloud Mountain, which is about a ranch in Palm Springs where many of us hung out for many years during our guerrilla period, and look for it in the future. Well, what more is there to say? We could go on forever, but I think the appropriate moment has come for me to thank Robert Anton Wilson and Paul and Walter and Andrew and Frank and John Lilly and everyone else and all of you. We're getting stronger. We're going to get moving again. The time has come. We've been laid back. We've been cocooning. It was good to do that. We had to kind of cool out a little bit, let the smoke die down a little bit. In the next 10 years, we're going to get things moving faster and higher than ever before. We're going to make the 60s look like a Girl Scout tea party. Let's go!
Well, the good Dr. Leary sure was charged up at the end of that conference, wasn't he? Unfortunately, the 90s didn't turn out as radical as he hoped. But unless I miss my guess, things are finally getting to the point we hoped we'd be reaching over 20 years ago. I guess we're just a little slow. And as you now know, the second tape in this series wasn't an hour long like the first part that we heard in the last podcast. So I've decided to fill in with another short bit from the Leary archive that may fit in quite well here. The tape was labeled Aileron, that's A-L-A-R-O-N, Aileron CTR, so I guess it's the Aileron Center, on August 7th, 1982. But what caught my attention with the little note that was attached to it is that it's a short segment of Timothy talking about Dr. John Lilly. Now, my only word of caution on listening to this would be to be extremely cautious about what he says about ketamine. On many occasions, I've heard Ann and Sasha Shulgin warn about the possibility of getting habituated to it, although I personally have to admit that after having experienced it a few times, I never had an urge to even try it again, mainly because I wasn't learning anything new each time I used it after the first time. But I have several friends who have really gone off the deep end on it a few times, so for what it's worth, I am definitely not advocating the use of ketamine. And with that little proviso, let's now hear what Dr. Leary had to say about Dr. Lilly on the 7th of August in 1982. And by the way, where were you on that day?
We've talked off and on about this meta-biological level or out-of-the-body level, and I was having a discussion with Francis Jeffrey at lunch about John Lilly, who figures here. See, John Lilly, by the way, is one of the first scientists to use LSD. He's the first scientist that I know of to really come out with the notion of the brain as a biocomputer. So at circa 6 He's also, at Circuit 7, more than any scientist, perhaps who ever lived, has stressed interspecies communication, because that's genetic, you know. And he's trying to talk to the dolphins, and he's saying, listen to the whales. Now, that's straight-out DNA talk, because DNA wants that. So he's taking a position which is above the human, you know, position. He's up there, and he's saying, well, humans should meet Mr. Dolphin, you know. He's had encouraged love affairs and sexual affairs between dolphins and human beings. I mean, that is a DNA point of view as opposed to species chauvinism. And now, John Lilly, turns out he's ahead of us when we get to these out-of-the-body experiences. With ketamine is definitely a drug that is beyond life. When you take ketamine, and I'm not advocating ketamine, it's a very complicated philosophic, and it's a death experience. Now, if you're afraid of death, that's terrible, but it's a non-terminal death experience. And that's the concept. Matter of fact, death is a wonderful thing as long as you don't go overboard on it, right? When you take ketamine, you park your body, and the wonderful thing about ketamine, it's the best anesthetic. And you talk to any vet or talk to any anesthesiologist, he'll tell you, my God, it's the ideal anesthetic because the body's just parked there, and the heart's beating, and the respiration. You don't have to worry, you know, with heroin or barbiturates, you have to worry about, you know, the heart and the lungs and all that. Ketamine, it just chugs along and idling, and, you know, while you're gone. And cut it up, you don't care. I mean, you're off in the video arcade while they're banging out the fenders of your car, you know, and cutting you up. It doesn't even belong to me. So, you know, it was a nice car when it lasted, but so we're talking about how what does Lilly do? Because Lily's getting farther and farther removed from life and from human communication. And the reason for that, I think this is a speculation, but he's imprinting his own meta-biological experiences. He says in his books, he said in The Scientist, and he says in his new book he's got coming out called From Here to Eternity, you know, it's not addiction. I don't take this drug over and over again because, you know, I have to have it or I'll bite my, you know, rob little old ladies to get it. It's simply that he's imprinted, it's simply more interesting at these higher levels, and he's willing to come down as long as we can make it interesting enough for him here, you know, and if he, but if he were here today, we had a wonderful experience at Esalen. I was giving a seminar there, and John Lilly came into my seminar the first night I was there, and was he loaded. He sat down, and he started talking about ketamine and talking about this book, and for, was it about an hour and a half? He was totally stoned out in ketamine. He talked absolutely with the greatest clarity and the greatest precision. That was the time he came out with this line about shoot up or shut up. And then Francis felt that he was stimulated enough by this room full of quite intelligent people who were interested in what he had to say that he was able to do this and so forth. But the problem, in a sense, if you want to call it a problem with Lilly or with any of these adventurers, is that you start imprinting and re-imprinting this new reality, and it gets to be more interesting than coming down here to playing the game of, you know, Sausalito and Highway 101 and, you know, and getting the act together for tomorrow. So, well, that's, we've zapped through 24 stages, 100 billion neurons, becoming microcomputers. We've had a wonderful doom-boom confrontation. I thank you for that, because we had to face that issue. And we have married East and West. We've married Richard Alpert and Baba Ram Das. We've appointed John Lilly the hero of our times. I've had a wonderful time today. I really thank you for coming, and it's been a very enjoyable day. We'll meet again.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that little side trip with me, and to continue along a little further on our historical journey of the last century, I'm going to play a short but kind of fascinating little clip that came from another tape that is labeled Joyful Wisdom Program. And it's from a very old radio show that was hosted by Gabriel Wisdom, who I think is probably the same guy who's now the money manager guru on National Propaganda Radio. But before he took his turn to the right, he was interviewing people like Commander Cody, Dizzy Gillespie, and, of course, our old friend, Dr. Timothy Leary. Now, this short talk by Timothy doesn't really bring us anything new other than his opinion on Rolling Stone moving east. But at the end of it, Gabriel Wisdom plays a song by a German band with Timothy Leary singing vocals. And I don't think there are many recordings of Dr. Leary singing. At least, I've never heard another one. And so I thought maybe we should preserve it here. And as to the quality of the song, well, I'll leave that up to you to decide when you hear it in just a few minutes.
And now, here's Timothy Leary.
Well, Gabriel, it's a pleasure to return with my quarterly report. In the last 3 months, I've been acting as an intelligence agent, sorting out all the information, attempting to get all the maps I can of what's happening and what's going to happen. And in my role as intelligence agent, I'm going to bring my employers, that is the radio audience, up to date. The first thing that's happening is a continuation of the era of good feeling. The country is definitely feeling well. In particular, the Sun Belt, that is the southwest of this country, is feeling better and better as more and more intelligent Americans are moving into the Sun Belt. That's one of the most astonishing migrations in human history, Gabriel. In the last 15 years, without any bloodshed or even any visible notice, there's been a tremendous brain drain. The smartest people in the Northeast have left and come down to the South and the Southwest, particularly California, Arizona. And the dumb people in the Sun Belt have all gone to Washington, New York to seek their fortunes there. People like Jan Wenner of Rolling Stone. You know, he's just plain dumb. He's got a track record now that everything he touches is turning wrong simply because he's betting on the past. He backed Bella Abzug to run for mayor of New York. He backed Bob Dylan in his new movie, bomb after bomb, because Jan Wenner is betting on the past. And he's moved Rolling Stone magazine headquarters to New York simply because he's working exactly in the wrong direction. Now, there's some people still going around crying doom. The doomsday sayers, the people who are warning of and hoping for some sort of apocalyptic crisis, an earthquake, an end to everything. Now, when anyone lays that trip on you, just look at them and smile and say, listen, the world isn't coming to an end. You've come to an end of your vision. It's you who feel that your end is at hand. But the evolutionary picture is moving along beautifully. And all you have to do is get that evolutionary perspective and see how the waves of increased intelligence are happening and surf them. And you'll be sharing in the really good things that are happening.
Coming up on the Joyful Wisdom program, a rare German export album called 7 Up, featuring Timothy Leary with electronic music group Ashra Temple. Timothy sings on an upcoming track. Stay tuned. This rare recording, done in Germany in 1972. Timothy Leary on vocals with electronic group Ashra Temple. The album's called 7 Up.
I'm a right-hand lover. Got a hinge on my thumb. I'll manipulate you, baby, 'cause that's the way it's done. I'm so cool and cool, and I know how. Well, I'm a right-hand lover, and I can bring you Cadillac. I'm always know the right way. Got money how. No how. Hand leather, right hand leather. Shoe leather. I'm a one-way lover. I can mini tune your dial, bring vision, help in your meter. I can go for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. I'm a jazz. Look, I'm the class, 'cause I know how.
You are given a body of facts that have been pre-digested and interpreted for you, and the role of an original, innovative thinker under that system is not as easy as it once was. That would be my judgment.
Would you believe that Norman Vincent Peale likes the song we've just heard?
You're listening to the Psychedelic Salon, where people are changing their lives one thought at a time.
Well, what can I say after that, huh? I guess that because that soundbite came out of the Timothy Leary archive and is from a program that he obviously had a part in, then I guess I should accept the fact that it really was Tim Leary singing there. And who am I to doubt the wisdom of Gabriel, huh? Anyway, that was what passed for psychedelic entertainment in the 1970s. So even though we still don't have world peace, at least our entertainment seems to have improved a bit since then, at least according to my taste. Now, while I would like to mention a few other things right now, I feel that I'd better just bring today's program to an end. For some reason, it's been difficult to get this podcast out to you. I had it all put together and edited a week ago, but then due to some commotion here in the salon, I accidentally deleted the file. Overwrote it, actually. And by the time I discovered my mistake, it was way too late to recover it. So this podcast has already taken me almost twice as long to produce as normal, and I better not press my luck with any more talk and just get back to daydreaming about pitching my tent in Kevin and Kadoma's backyard tonight. Don't worry, Kevin, I won't be there, but I will in my dreams. So that's going to do it for now, and I'll close today's podcast again by reminding you that this and all of the podcasts from the Psychedelic Salon are freely available for you to use in your own audio projects under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 3.0 license. And if you have any questions about that, just click the Creative Commons link at the bottom of the Psychedelic Salon webpage, which you can find at psychedelicsalon.org. And if you are interested in some of the philosophy behind the Psychedelic Salon, you can hear all about it in my novel, The Genesis Generation, which is available as an audiobook that you can download at genesisgeneration.us. And for now, this is Lorenzo signing off from Cyberdelic Space. Be well, my friends.